Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth and all the amazing things that go into the city, from politics, business, news, trends, culture, you name it, we do it. Here's my man, Ryan. What's up, Ryan? Good to have you back for a second show. Does this mean you're an expert now at podcasting because now you're on twice?
Absolutely not. Whenever I briefly listened to part of last week's podcast and want to rip my eyeballs out for a little vocal flub I did. So I'll try my best this time not to mess anything up.
Dude, it was great. I think you did a great job. People liked it. Got a lot of, responses about it, people who listened to it. So it was definitely cool having your take. And so beautiful weekend, beautiful time. Did you go to the Main Street Art Festival / art fair / I forget what's all going down. Like there's like 5 events. I don't know. Did you go down to downtown?
I did not. I unfortunately had multiple birthday parties in Dallas yesterday, and today I am doing a giant Easter egg hunt at TCU. So I unfortunately have been pretty busy this weekend.
Yeah,
Did you make it out?
I did not make it out. I did not. I wanted to, but then, haven't been home a lot, so it's just good to be sitting at home. But it sounds like it's been a success based off of like the stories and just seeing who got to play. I love seeing local artists being able to share their gifts out in the world with a bunch of people traveling across the Metroplex to be at the festival, and having, national artists in town, and to have our local musicians jamming out. I think it's super cool to see. But it seems like there's a lot of drama as well when it comes to like the music festival, the art fair. Do you know anything about this, or like what's kind of the energy?
It's difficult because I don't quite know what is fact, what is rumor, what is what. So there's a lot of things flying around about the disagreements between the two festivals, why we have 2 festivals in the first place. I personally would have preferred if both festivals weren't on the same weekend. I think we could have had a lot more fun if they were spread out a little bit. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to be happy that it's back and that we're having a lot of people downtown and highlighting artists. I think that's a good thing for any weekend.
Yeah, looking at it, this is the second most well-attended event in Fort Worth, behind the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, which generates about $27 million in economic revenue. I'd be interested to know, what does the festival do compared to that?
Yeah, and it's bringing people back downtown, and that's important. We need downtown to be a place where people want to go.
Yeah. The drama, I mean, I don't know too much about it, but, it just seems like this kind of also goes into our next story, but, the drama between the rest of downtown and Sundance Square and the art fair, was focused on local, which I reading the articles and reading the feedback of what happened this weekend, it seems like it went well and it worked well together, because it gave local artists the opportunity to be in a national pool around, the Main Streets Arts Festival. So I mean, I support that. I think that's cool. And I guess we'll hear more as it finishes up today, which is Sunday. But yeah, I mean, it seems like hopefully they had a good crowd and people got the business that they needed.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, I like the idea of one kind of focusing on, what historically the Main Street Arts Festival is focused on. I like the idea of one that focuses more on local. I don't know if that actually came to fruition too much. We'll find out in subsequent reporting, but the idea of it, that is appealing to me.
Yeah, and it looks like it's the 3rd largest Main Street Art Festival in the country, based off of this article I'm looking at, where Bud Kennedy says a lot of that there is drama, but he really doesn't say anything else in it.
Yeah, but I want you to spill all the beans.
Yeah, nobody wants to spill the beans. Everybody wants to stay in the pot. No one wants to spill the beans. But hey, it looked like it was cool. I'm looking at some of the numbers here. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. But yeah, let's go ahead and move into this. Kind of is good to go ahead and move into the Downtown Inc. story. So as you guys know, we do 2 short stories, 3 short stories, and then a main story. And so for our first short story, we're going to dive into Downtown Fort Worth Inc. I think this is a good follow-up from last episode, because last episode we kind of harped on like downtown's dying. There's nothing going to happen downtown. We should all be concerned. Riata's leaving. If Riata's leaving, what's the strategy to keep things to stay? So it's kind of ironic. After we had that episode, now we have our big arts festival that actually makes downtown poppin'. And then Downtown Fort Worth Inc.'s 40th annual meeting happened last Wednesday, celebrated the growing residential hospitality and educational development in the city. Fort Worth exceeded its 10% affordable housing goal, and they celebrated that. Developers have built 2,818 housing units since 2013, with plans for an additional 2,875 units. And they go on kind of to continue to say, hey, some of our schools are getting better. They're saying there's a lot of amazing things happening downtown. $1.5 billion investment either spent or planned for downtown, which also includes the desperately needed convention center. Anytime I go to a city and I see what needs some impact, the convention center, I look at ours, I'm like, man, it is ugly. What else we have? The draft comes out. People will agree about 90% of it. So that kind of shows like, hey, we were celebrating all the good stuff we have in Downtown Inc. What is your take here?
Yeah, I like they have the plan 2033 is what it's called. It's focused on 6 areas of business development, education, housing, retail, arts, entertainment, transportation, and urban design. And I think everybody can get behind those big 6 areas, obviously, because they basically cover everything. But I like the approach that Downtown Fort Worth Inc., City of Fort Worth, and Trinity Metro are taking. There is a survey that they put out for everybody to take. So if you go to the Fort Worth Report article about this, there's a link to the survey.
We will also put it in the description.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that it gives a great opportunity for us to provide feedback. So please, if you're listening, fill out the survey. It takes about 45 seconds. I'm excited for the idea of it. But like you mentioned, the drama does become an issue here because Sundance Square hasn't really been too on board with this plan. And if Sundance Square isn't a part of it, that limits the effectiveness of downtown, because Sundance Square is the heart of downtown. Yeah,
and it seems like Andy Taft, the CEO, was pretty like straightforward about like nonsense, and I don't know, talking about there's a lot of drama or gossip. He could even be talking about things like the 817 podcast, who always talks crap about downtown. But to me, it seems more directly attacked to the kind of like the Sundance Square stuff with the trees and all the other stuff that kind of goes on with the fight between downtown and Sundance.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how this plays out. Hopefully they can get it together. I think a lot of people want to know what the Bass family's new vision is for Sundance Square. We've heard a lot about this new vision, and now we're just kind of waiting to see what that new vision is, what it looks like. Yeah,
and I think, again, the problem with this is when I see someone the point of an event like this is to brag on yourself. It's to keep money in the pots and to grow what you're currently doing. It's not a place for self-awareness. It's not a place to have self-reflection and be honest with ourselves. And, I think that happens a lot when you're a city employee or you're a member of of Fort Worth, and your job is Fort Worth, right? Your job is to care. So then you can't take everything that Andy and the Downtown Fort Worth Inc. take as, oh, things are going good, because they're biased. It's their job to say that, and they work hard to get whatever results they see is true. I think this is the same kind of thing that happens at Visit Fort Worth or economic development. I feel like they're always 50% of the time defending their impact. You see with the Fort Worth Chamber, they'll have the crazy tweet like, numbers don't lie, bro. And then it's like they like show these numbers, and then it's just like, okay, if you believe that you're doing great, great. But I just don't know how much I kind of believe in it. I mean, I do see the whole 10-year vision because, the worst case scenario is Southside continues to be great. Texas A&M shows up. They're bringing their innovation masters and entrepreneurship. So you're going to get a lot of engineers who got their bachelors from A&M. They're going to come to get their masters. They're going to do innovative work in Texas A&M. So now you got kind of the south side of downtown. Panther Island really comes going and really starts thriving. You then really create a sandwich where downtown maybe can't fail, where today it's very centered than out base, where Sundance has to rock in order for the rest of it to rock, where it might just be a place where if, Sasha Bass and them don't get aligned, that Downtown Inc. looks like they're not betting or worrying about Sundance Square anymore because they see the sandwich happening for their other properties.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying about like downtown Fort Worth Inc. saying what they need to say, but from my perspective, they're saying the things that I want to hear right now. And I like that they're bringing in that idea of Panther Island. They're cognizant of what is happening around them. And I think that's important. And I like the proposed vision. And I think surveys and things like that are great because it does give us an opportunity to really be vocal.
Yeah.
And you never know. Maybe if the response is strong enough, they do actually take it into account. I'm excited to see what happens here, but I like the idea of them having a big picture rather than just focusing on one segment.
Yeah, and then you also have, in the kind of the Fort Worth Report article, they just kind of, you could just tell there was also true data showcasing that, like, Wednesday is the most, like, poppin' day for the week because downtown companies are making their people come at least, the middle of the week, where, Mondays maybe are lower because people are able to work from home Mondays and Friday. So you're also having that discussion around what does a new downtown looks like when you look at the article and it says that 71% of downtown real estate is made up of offices across the country, major metropolitan areas across the country, according to the Brookings Institute. I think that dynamic is also going to be important. And I know they had a keynote speaker, which you were a fan of. I don't know if you want to bring up Scott Page.
We're going to cover my guy, Scott Page, later on. But I liked a lot of what he was saying. And one thing that I like from the article is that it seems like they are getting more focused on the residential side of downtown, which is important. If you're going to have a lessening impact of the business office space side of things, then focusing on that downtown or that residential side downtown, that's going to be able to make up that gap because you want people to get downtown at some point. If they're not coming in for work, might as well have them live there.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and go into the next story. You kind of really articulated this, and this is something that is definitely up Jimmy's alley too. So, what do you got for us?
I'll do my best to do Jimmy proud while he's currently running around in Paris eating crepes. There is an article in the Fort Worth Report about neighborhood coalitions rallying against short-term rentals. A large group of neighborhood coalitions are making some proposals about short-term rentals. And the focus is on trying to find a common ground. This has been an ongoing story that y'all have covered about short-term rentals in Fort Worth. There's a lot that can be covered here because there's some big gaps that need to be filled in. Some of the proposals for bringing short-term rentals into the fold, we're talking like Airbnbs, is requiring them to have a 9% hotel occupancy tax that hotels are required to pay, asking for neighbor approval in order to get a permit, requiring permits in the first place. There's a lot going on here, and it'll be interesting to see how the city council approaches these short-term rentals, what we're going to do about it. We've seen Arlington come up with some ideas on how to approach this, where they created a zone that Airbnbs can be permitted. It's near Cowboy Stadium, Six Flags, where they have the majority of their events. Fort Worth's a little bit different in that we have our events are kind of spread out more around the city. And so some of the proposals for us to have zones in some of those areas, such as around Dickies Arena, near Fairmount, and a few other areas. It'll be interesting to see what happens from here, because there are some proposals that, for the most part, does seem kind of like a relatively middle of the road option. I do know that it's not unusual in some places for those Airbnbs to pay that hotel occupancy tax. I can't emphasize enough the bare minimum amount of research on this, but I know that like LA does something similar.
Yeah. No, I mean, the Airbnb saga of like, is it good for the world or is it bad? I don't know. I'm torn, because do I enjoy staying in Airbnbs more than I do a hotel? Yes, when I travel. But do I see the ramifications of now, we're already having limited housing, but now some investor can just buy these Airbnb, these houses and make them look nice enough that people will Airbnb them. It really impacts the fabric of a neighborhood and a community. And, so I just don't know where I live on like what point of view I have. Like, am I pro? Like, a part of me, it's like I'm pro, what does the consumer want, in the sense of like, if we want to stay in Airbnbs, we got to have Airbnbs for people to travel to DFW and be able to, find an Airbnb to live in. But I'm also like pro equity and building, getting people homes so that they can start building equity in their lives. And if you can't do that because now every house is an asset for an investor, then, we're on that path where more and more people are just going to be rentals. And we're all going to be those millennials who never get to buy our dream house. So we go rent an Airbnb to live like we live in our dream house, for a weekend. And then, so it's tough. And I totally get it. Looking at the neighborhoods, this is where me and, Jimmy live. The neighborhoods are Bentley Village, Water Chase, Brentwood, Oak Hills, Central Meadowbrook, Chimney Wood, Cooks Meadows, Eastern Hills, Far East, Garden of Eden, Hanley, Hollow Hills, Riverbend, Rhinewood, West Meadowbrook, White Lake Hills, and Woodhaven neighborhoods, all kind of on that east side of Fort Worth between here and Arlington, which also, my argument why they care about this probably so much is because, right, the airport's right there, AT&T Stadium and Cowboys games, you got UNT, the college there now, having big events. There, there's a lot of events happening all the time, right? WWE was just there, right? It just continues to be something. Canelo fight. It's always something happening. And so it's a prime area to really put some Airbnbs in, because people are always traveling to DFW. It's an affordable flight. Boom, airport. And then bam, I'm going to the Canelo fight. And I can do this for a 3-day, 2-night event. And that's kind of my trip to Dallas-Fort Worth. So I can see that being difficult. And it'd be interesting to know how many hotels are around that space if we don't have the Airbnb. Like, we do have the hotels in Fort Worth and Dallas, but they're also, that's a trip to get to in order to get to Arlington and all the event space.
Yeah, and like, I totally understand where some of the neighborhoods are coming from with the idea of you don't want new strangers in your neighborhood every week, essentially.
Yeah,
I understand that. But I also get like the Airbnb. I get the importance of it. We used one for when I got married. That's where the groomsmen stayed, because I wasn't about to, rent out 4 hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And so I get where everybody is coming from. And so that's why, for the most part, this does sound like a reasonable proposal from the neighborhoods of East Fort Worth Alliance, requiring proof of property insurance, limited number of occupants, things like that sound pretty reasonable. One thing that I didn't necessarily like was that if 20% of property owners oppose the registration for the license, you have to go before a hearing. I'm not opposed to like a certain number of neighbors being against it that you have to go to the hearing, but 20% is just really low in my mind. If you have 5 neighbors, just one of them has to oppose it.
Yeah.
So like that maybe should be a little bit higher, but I get where everybody is coming from.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it kind of goes. At least we're having that discussion. I definitely think it's a no-brainer for the tax, right? Short-term rentals account for less than 1% of total occupancy tax revenue. So the city needs to find other ways to, get money, because this property tax stuff is getting outrageous. So finding a way.
Yeah, I agree. Do you want to move into the main story?
Let's do it.
So our main story today is we're talking about the mayor of the Stockyards, Steve Murrin, who I apologize to him if I pronounced that wrong, but he's endorsing Deborah Peoples, Democrat, for county judge. This big deal. Steve Murrin is a prominent Fort Worth Republican, is the first line of the article on the Forest Star Telegram. What are your opening thoughts?
Yeah, it makes me want to go to the Stockyards, and the walking Stockyards hater. I'm down to roll through if this is what kind of sense our Cowboys are going to start having in this world. If they're going to become logical, empathetic, and realize there's more than one way to live in Fort Worth, I think I'm all about it. But it, to me, it feels a little strategic. It feels a little strategic. There must have been talks, with Whitley, with Price, with Parker, the room where it happens, if you would, right? Are like, how can we say how we feel? Because I don't think Whitley wants O'Hare to win. Like, I don't think Maddie wants O'Hare to win. They just can't say it, besides to their 20 friends who are in the room where it happens. But I feel like they're like, hey, Steve, you're kind of important, but you're like, you're a mayor of a fake town. So like, you could actually say it. And I think they're just like, hey, you say it. That's kind of my vibe about it.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on behind those closed doors. But I will say that I totally get why someone like Maddie can't come out and endorse Deborah, because it's that double-edged sword. On one side of it, you could do it and endorse Deborah, but there's this idea that for the further you get away from Fort Worth and the longer you get away from the time you do it, the shorter the story gets. And so while it might make sense right now, there is this idea that eventually that headline can come back to her, and all it has to say is that Republican mayor endorses former Democratic Party leader over fellow Republican.
Yeah.
And that can be pretty damaging. So that's what makes it a little bit different, just because Deborah does have that in the past, being a leader in the party. But on the flip side of that, if you are looking to make that strong statement that you don't agree with the far right of your party, this is that opportunity. This would be a very, very strong statement to make. But I don't know if you're willing to make that step, because that would be a very, very big step.
I just love how he says he meaning Steve Murrin said this. He said that he's talking about O'Hare, is extreme right, one of the crazies. I just love that. We're not the only one that uses the word crazies all the time when we talk about these people.
He's the mayor of the Stockyards. That's a straight talker right there.
Yeah. You got to be a straight talker there. I'd be interested to know where it goes. And honestly, like, super like this is a win. Also, like, I think, like, when we talk about what we want from Fort Worth leaders, regardless if it was strategic or it came from the goodness of his heart and he took the sacrifice, this is big props and super cool. And yeah, I think when you really look at the power of, and this is someone who I was with last week, kind of talking about this stuff when we were discussing Fort Worth. You know, they kind of said that, you know, Maddie being so showcasing her centeredness in the Texas Tribune and how she's much more practical and has and still shows that she has a lot of centered ideas or even things that Democrats agree. You know, that is kind of Democrat forward. She having a progressive judge would be huge. You know, where now you're pulling from those forces like that. So you're only going to make Maddie having to stay more centered or to be able to have to, her being more giving of centered policy or something that's more urban based. You can kind of use that excuse or you have to collaborate with the judge. And so now if we did have a progressive judge, how that could make our Republican mayor be able to be more open about her being centered and having someone to collaborate with, that it's not Maddie, it's more like she's trying to work with Deborah. I don't know, kind of, I thought that was super powerful, but I don't know what that would look like if it was the other way. Like, does you know, would the mayor just beef with O'Hare, or would, you know, they try to make things work?
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what happens from here forward, just with the relationship between the mayor and the county judge. You know, due to the pandemic, that relationship got a lot tighter. Like, they had to work a lot closer together. In the past, it wasn't as public of a relationship. I mean, that could just be me not being aware of it. That's definitely a possibility. But I do feel like that the pandemic really highlighted the power of the county judge. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from here, regardless who wins for the county judge, because I do think we're going to see a little bit different of how that role plays out in the area.
Yeah, yeah. And as we know, this comes from after Maddie's Texas Tribune interview, but then you also had Whitley saying that both sides are being run by extremists, which I don't fully agree with, especially in Texas. I don't think that's, you know, true at all. In Tarrant County politics or Texas politics, like, there's one extremist, you know, but I don't see how he could have said that both parties. But we'll see. Yeah,
and to kind of have a slight pivot here, going along with just Fort Worth politics, State Senator Bev Powell dropped out of her re-election campaign because of the new district lines, is what she essentially said.
Yep. 70-year-old senator from Burleson suspended her re-election campaign on April 6 after a court denied her motion for injunctive relief for the newly redistricted state maps ahead of the November 2022 elections.
The map was drawn. It's Senate District 10 has
October 2021.
Senate District 10 has historically been the most competitive Senate district in the state, and by a wide margin. That's the district that Wendy Davis used to have, that Connie Burton had, and then Bev Powell. It's always been a really competitive, tight race, and the new District 10 is not nearly as moderate, or like the distribution of Republican and Democratic voters in it. It's not nearly as close as it was before. I'm a little bit surprised to see Bev Powell drop out.
Why is that?
It's a little bit later on than I would have expected, but I do get the looking at the map and kind of not seeing a path forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, you want to move into wins and losses?
Yeah, sure.
We are moving rapidly fast. You know, me and you, we keep it tight. I mean, we're at 30 minutes right now with back to our wins and losses.
A bit of a lollygagger. You and Steve Murrin are the cut to the chase, straight talking Cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. We're straight into it. It felt like what's funny about it, I was like reading the newspaper and looking through the news. It felt like it was going to be a big news week because we had a lot of things going on. The art festival, Downtown Inc., just a couple events. We just finished the food festival that we have. So we just had a lot of stuff going on, and it seemed like there was going to be a lot to talk about. But really, unless you were going to recap a lot of these events, there wasn't much news outside of that.
Yeah, we didn't get too much drama at the actual events to break down.
Yeah. Go ahead and let's dive into wins and losses. And we start with our losses and end with our wins so we can end on a good note.
Yeah, so I'll start with my loss. My loss is that the Paris Coffee Shop is going through a big renovation. If anyone listening knows me, you know my fondness of Paris Coffee Shop. I love any kind of diner that has that brown coffee mug that's been there since 1973.
There you go.
That's always a good time for me. But my loss is that the famous mural on the side of Paris Coffee Shop, painted by Bo Powell, has been covered up with the new renovation. And in the defense of the renovators, they said it's because the mural hadn't been properly taken care of, and it was necessary. It was beyond just fixing it up, and multiple holes had to be drilled and things like that. But it's still a loss because that was a beautiful work of art. I'm a big fan of public art, and losing that mural just shows that when we do these big public art pieces, we have to take care of them. And so I understand why they had to paint over it, but it's still a loss. We are literally losing the mural, and that is a loss.
Yeah, and that was I know it's by new owners now, so I wonder, do you have any idea of what it's going to look like, the new model of Paris? Because it was such a classic place.
I don't know.
Where it felt like you traveled back in time and you got to hang out. It was really cool.
So it's the same folks that renovated Roy Pope Grocery. And I love the new Roy Pope Grocery. I have a fond appreciation for sandwiches, and their sandwiches are quite good. They have my confidence with what they're going to do to Paris Coffee Shop. I hope they don't try to make it too nice, because there are other breakfast places in that area that can serve like the nicer breakfast. I mean, Brood's across the street.
Yeah.
But I am someone that appreciates like the one type of coffee, the crispy bacon and the French toast that is brought out to you within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That really hits it. Diners have a very special place in my heart. So I hope they can keep the spirit of Paris Coffee Shop. I'm excited to see what happens. It was pretty quick renovation. I think they're set to open in May. Could be wrong on that, but I think it's May is when they're set to reopen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good spot, and it's in great location. I was down there recently, and I saw the construction on the back end of Shinjuku that they've been happening. They're moving fast on that. That thing's looking pretty serious.
Yeah, I went to a lunch and I looked up and I was like, when did we get a parking garage here?
Yeah, it's turning out pretty sharp. Cool. Well, my loss, I would say it's a loss just because it seems like weird communication between council member Chris Nettles and the Fort Worth, I guess, the city agenda. Chris Nettles outlined what he believed is a citizen police review board, which will look at which he discussed during a Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce event last Thursday. He talked to an audience of 20 people, and he basically said that they're going to have a working session April 19th, and that they were going to discuss a police review board. But then it got weird because the city said, no, we're not planning to talk about this month. And so it's just like, I feel like, I don't know, this is either, a rookie mistake by Nettles and just trying to, get something that he did, wasn't prepared for correctly or isn't being discussed, because you also have, recently, Mayor Parker and, Chief Noakes talking about Fort Worth Safe. And the idea of, we've had the most homicides in like 27 years, and now we want to drop it by 10%. And there was this whole thing about, Mayor Parker saying that we need to make sure everyone feels safe and we need to aspire for a world where Fort Worth is safe. So it's like, I don't know if like because of that messaging and that campaign, Nettles' kind of idea here just got thrown to the side and not needed at the moment. So my loss is just like one, I guess it's just like the lack of communication on this, but also this is just like, do we really need another board or task force? You know, it's there has to be different kind of solutions, or just call a spade, and then, you know, Fort Worth doesn't care about what it actually says it wants to care about. So it's, yeah. Anyways, what is your take?
I don't know, to be honest. Like, I don't know what happened in the communication there. I just haven't read enough information in order to make a strong take on it. I don't necessarily know where it's going, what the future of such board would be. I think it's just a wait and see situation for me, because I just don't necessarily know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, what is your win?
My win is going back to my guy, Scott Page. And to be clear, I don't know a lot about Scott Page aside from the very brief that I've read so far. But he said that we want to avoid plazas in downtowns. And I just love anybody that, you know, comes up with their own word. And the idea of the word plaza, meaning we don't want a plaza that doesn't serve a purpose and is empty. That is awesome to me, because I don't want us to have any plazas. But also he said some other things that I really like. He said downtowns need to focus more on the streets than the skyline, like walkable roads, parks, and accessible transportation. Just making downtown a place where people want to gather. And that's all in the Fort Worth Report article. And I just think that having a guy like that leading this, I know it could just be words or whatnot, but I like what I'm hearing once again. And also just, I think Blossus is just a wonderful new term that is going to be a part of my daily communication, which my wife will surely hate.
And for those of you, it's Blaza, like BLAZA. That's how he says it?
BLAH, like
H.
blah.
Yeah. Blah, like
Zuh.
it feels blah. So just want to make sure people understand what we're saying here.
Yeah, it's like when you go up to the plaza and you're like, blah.
Yeah. Yeah. My win, I guess I kind of keep it in the loop. My win will probably be just, I'm actually going to say that we'll find out, because obviously we did not go to the arts festival or the arts fair. But I'm going to say it's a win because I think it worked. I think I like the idea of local artists, both musicians, but then artists. If they were there, like again, we'll see what was the show up and how effective things were. But I actually think it being together is great, giving local artists a chance to see what full-time artists do on a regular basis at festivals, where, you know, they're going out to these festivals across the country and they're going to be making their living, you know, by going to these festivals for 3 days and making these chops. I think to have our local people there to also get some of that national touch is a win. So even though there was probably a lot of drama around the art fair and the Main Streets Arts Festival, I actually think there's some cleverness to it and shouldn't be that big of a deal. And we should all woosah, be okay. And it was good for Fort Worth.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't make it out this year. Things got in the way, but I've been before. I love the art festival. I think it's an excellent way to showcase downtown Fort Worth, what Fort Worth has to offer. And like we said earlier, I like the idea of focusing on both national and local. I think that's a good idea. I don't know how well it worked out in practice, but for the future, I think that's a good idea going forward.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so there's kind of our show. I mean, we're going to have a show that's under 40 minutes. So I think we did a good job. We're keeping it nice and crispy. For all of you listening, hey, thank you for listening to the 817 podcast. It felt like today was going to be an epic news week. I think we had some great little tidbits though, and seeing what happens. But we'll also see, like, a lot of what we talked about are just ongoing updates on something that we've already really hammered home a lot throughout the years. And so we'll keep you updated. And if any new fresh perspective happens or things come, we'll keep you posted. Also, we will not be recording next week as it will be Easter. As we saw, right, Ryan is already celebrating Easter at TCU and he became a professional. So I'm sure you got a lot more Easter hunts to attend and support. So we are just not going to be recording next week.
Yeah, I'm basically a professional egg hider person now. So that's going to be my career for the future.
Hey.
So I will be busy next week.
Yeah. So we will see you in 2 weeks after Easter, and really excited to continue to get the ball rolling as we get closer to May. Peace.
Peace, y'all.
Dopamine swipe. Follow us like double tap. Now they control your life.